The world is changing fast. New technologies, shifting social landscapes, and evolving ways of living can feel both exciting and overwhelming. So, how do we find balance? I'm Stephanie von Bismarck, activist, author, and digital educator. Welcome to my podcast, where each week I sit down with some of the world's best thinkers, trailblazers, and extraordinary people to explore how we can navigate this fast-moving world. We'll share practical tools and uncover inspiring ideas to help us all thrive and answer the simple question, how do we manage? What if the root of so many struggles we face, burnout, anxiety, depression, addiction, even loneliness, isn't, as we sometimes tend to think, weakness or failure, but actually past unhealed trauma? In 2025, nearly 1 billion people around the world are living with a mental health disorder. Suicide remains one of the leading causes of death, particularly amongst very young people. And yet, so much of what drives these crises remains invisible, unspoken, and even misunderstood. My guest today is someone who's on a mission to change that. Dr. Paul Conti is a trauma specialist and renowned psychiatrist and author of Trauma, the Invisible Epidemic. He trained at Stanford and Harvard Medical School, treats everyone from Fortune 500 leaders to survivors of severe trauma, and has been called one of the most important mental health voices of our time. His work has had such profound impact that even Lady Gaga wrote, "Dr. Conti has saved my life more than once. He has also saved the lives of people I love." In this conversation, we explore how trauma quietly shapes our lives, why healing isn't only about willpower, and what it really means to care for our mental health in the 21st century. This is one of the most important and possibly life-changing conversations we had so far on the show, so let's dive into it. But just a quick heads up before we do this. This episode includes discussions of anxiety, depression, and trauma, and suicide. If you're not in place to hear this right now, it's okay to pause and come back when you are. Dr. Paul Conti, thank you for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to see you and to see you again. We've sort of even collaborated on some things in the past, so it's a special honor to have you here today with me. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Well, you're very welcome, and it's an honor to be on your podcast. I know that this is a great development in your life and your career, and that it's going to be a good thing for a lot of people. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. I mean, obviously, we're going to start exploring, the trends of mental health. Where is the world right now? What have you seen? What are all your sort of insights and experiences? But, I always ask myself, what does a professional like you, a psychologist, psychiatrist, who obviously deals with a lot of, serious things in their daily life, is there something you do every day to manage your day the best, or that helps you manage your day better?
What I try and do is just keep in my mind that I want to approach the day with just a sense of gratitude. I mean, there's so many good things in life, and there's so many good things in my life, and it's easy to lose sight of that when days are stressful and we get tired or exasperated, and it can just be so difficult, and we can get kind of tunnel vision and see ourselves as beleaguered, and everything in life is coming at me, and it's so easy to get into that mode. And I think if we can just ground to, I am grateful to be here and to be doing what I'm doing, and there are a lot of choices in life, and these are the choices I've made. So when the stressors come, I can still try and pause for a second and ground to a sense of gratitude. I mean, I find that immensely helpful, especially when the stressors rise unexpectedly, which is not infrequent probably for anybody. Gratitude, the way that I'm using the word and I've sort of defined it in the work that I do, is also very active. There's a sense of feeling grateful, but there's also a putting that into action, right? Of realizing the honor of being here and being able to make an impact on the world and have some control over our own lives and to feel that and then to translate that into action. Like, what is my next decision going to be? It could be to get angry and frustrated, or it could be to pause and with patience solve a problem. I think it helps us not just inside, but in the translation from what we're feeling inside to what we choose to do outside.
So it's really a sort of conscious thought process.
The key is to work on our mental health. I mean, I think for all of us, it means something different, right? To build good mental health, right? To understand how do I work? How can I, by understanding myself, make myself healthier and happier? And we feel a sense then of empowerment inside of us, a sense of agency. And it's by working on ourselves, understanding ourselves and our lives and the narratives of our lives that lets us roll the tape forward to where we want to go and how we want to get there. There's a way that we can understand ourselves within our own lives, and from a perspective of good mental health, be sort of on the forward foot, so to speak, of control in our lives. So gratitude as not just a feeling inside, but a way that we're acting outside really builds upon a lot inside of us. I think if we build good mental health, then we can build a sense of gratitude, agency, empowerment, all of these things that we build upon understanding ourselves and our mental health. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health, right? Like everybody has a body, and we're interested in that, right? Or what are we putting into it? How is it functioning? How are we exercising? How are we sleeping, taking care of ourselves? I mean, this is extremely important, of course, in our bodies, but the same applies in our minds. Like we have a functioning brain, and that yields our mental health, so to speak. And can we approach that and understand that not from a perspective of, oh, let's identify what's wrong, but for each of us, how do we understand ourselves just like we want to understand our bodies better, so that we can be as healthy as we can be? Because ultimately, the mind and body are connected, and it's often the mind that's leading the body forward.
If you read the news every day, and it seems as if the mental health crisis is just getting worse. Have you seen any trends, or how has it sort of developed since the beginning of the century, and from your perspective in your line of work?
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, I mean, it's hard, maybe impossible, to really look at the situation around us and to not recognize that things have gotten worse. I think the stressors in the world in many, many ways have gotten higher. We're so interconnected, which can bring many good things, but it also can bring many bad things. And I think that we have seen that there has been a rise in factors that make us feel less secure, right? That bring more instability and fear generally to us, to people all over the world. And this included, of course, the pandemic and so many of the conflicts and just insecurity around us in the world. And at the same time, certainly in the United States, and I believe in many other countries too, the resources for mental health, the ability to access resources has declined. So we have an increasing problem and a decrease in both understanding and ability to access help. And I think that we see that things have gotten more and more difficult, and people have gotten less and less able to navigate the world around us. So yeah, I think that we are in a real crisis, and part of it is a healthcare crisis, part of it is a world crisis. But when you put all of it together, it certainly peaks with a mental health crisis.
So you're a very sort of world-renowned specialist in trauma. Help me define trauma a little bit.
Sure, trauma, a word that's used so often that we need to define it, as you said, in order to really understand what it means. And the definition of trauma that I've used and used in the first book that you were so kind to have an interview as one of the chapters in the book is an interview with you. And in that book, of course, we were talking about trauma in formative years and trauma for children, because as a person is younger, right, the trauma is more impactful. And the definition, there is something that happens to us that changes how our brain is functioning. So it overwhelms us, overwhelms our coping skills, and then there's real brain change within us. And that's part of what I was trying to show in the first book that we have real science that tells us and shows us how trauma, meaning distressing events that overwhelm our coping skills and rise to the level of brain changes, really do change us going forward. So seeing a new face, instead of being neutral, we see through the lens of fear. Just one example, or we age more inside than we do by the calendar. So someone may be 40 years old by the calendar and 50 years old by the genetic changes inside of them and the changes towards aging inside of us. So trauma really does change us in ways that make tremendous problems in mind and body. So part of the distress that I think humanity around the globe that people are in is there is so much trauma. And when people have experienced trauma, it becomes harder to deal with the next stressor, right? Because now we're changed inside and really changed for the worse unless we do something about it to make that change for the better. And even in people who haven't had that kind of direct trauma, which what you can get from something acute, a car accident, an illness, loss of a loved one, we can get it through something chronic, like chronically being in fear. Right? And we can also get it vicariously. There's so much of people watching the news and just seeing over and over again, the tragedies in the world around us and other people's suffering. And there's a way in which we're clicking on this all the time. We're looking at things that are bringing into us such distress that people can change their own brain by being so linked vicariously to someone else's trauma. So we know that these things happen and they make brain changes in us. And if they're not making brain changes, they're making an environment of insecurity and fear in us. And you see how this builds on itself, where people become more afraid, more isolated, more polarized, then more likely to affiliate, right, with groups that are just based upon sameness. So the rise in affiliation with hate groups. People say, okay, I'm now, retrenching to people who look like me, think like me, have the same religion as me, things that aren't about human values. They're about fear in people, making people susceptible to affiliating based upon factors that aren't about who a person is, but factors that can lead to prejudice. The same way people affiliate under prejudices because they feel the safety of others who are like them. And in environments like we have now, there's more and more polarization, including politically, where, now political thoughts or political values or beliefs are immediately taken as the litmus test of whether that person's okay or not. Right. So we certainly see in the United States something we almost never saw, say, when I was in college studying political science, which is just such a reflex of, oh, look, you think something different from me. Like you're bad. You're my enemy. Right. And there's so much of this reflex. And then we make more and more fear, more and more division. And we get to the point of saying, can we solve our problems? Right? Or are we so polarized that we're speaking different languages in a sense now that we just can't understand one another and we get lost in fear? And this is a real worry. And I think all we have to do is look at the world around us to see, I don't think this is alarmist. It's just observation of what's going on with us and in the world around us.
I think one very important question that we sort of discussed many times is how, also for an understanding, how severe trauma can be stored in one's body. The body remembers and is even going into sort of further generations, certain amounts of trauma,
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that concept?
Sure. This link between mind and body is present in each of us. And that link between mind and body, the impact of trauma, gets passed along through generations. So the first part of that, if you imagine when people have something traumatic that happens, it's now causing distress in the brain, then there are, so many neurons through the spinal cord and what's called the vagus nerve. And there's neurons that go down into our bodies and can, for example, cause tremendous tension in our bodies. That can result in high blood pressure, right? That can result in IBS and other GI symptoms that people have. It can cause so many problems from head to toe. It can cause chronic pain in people. And then the distress in the body goes back up to the mind, right? So anxiety in the brain is now distress in the body that goes back up and makes more anxiety in the brain. And, we can get lost in in the physical effects of the trauma, and then that can, in a sense, come to dominate our lives. It's estimated that a third to probably half of complaints that people bring to physical medicine doctors, so just to general doctors, not mental health physicians, are of mental health in origin. So you think a third to a half of things people say, I should see a doctor, right? Because something is going on in my body, is coming from mental health. So we create tremendous dysfunction in ourselves through the unaddressed mental health issues that we have and that we carry forward. And the trauma that affects us enough to change us also changes how we pass genes along, which was
exactly.
thought of as, that would have been thought of as science fiction or even just impossible until we understood that trauma in a person can change which genes are on or off when the person then passes along those genes. So it would never have been imagined that someone can, for example, have a terrible trauma when they're 15 years old, and then have a child, for example, 10 years later, 15 years later, and that child is directly affected by the trauma. A gene for something good that would have been passed along and be on and functioning is passed along in an off setting. So like that gene doesn't work. It's as if the gene doesn't exist. Or a gene that predisposes to something bad is then passed along in a way that gene is turned on. So so we pass along our genes, but we don't pass along their function, right? Whether their function is passed along is impacted by what happens to us. So a trauma can happen now and can directly affect a person who is even generations down the line.
Paul, help me understand how I would know if I'd inherited trauma or if I was likely to pass trauma on to my children.
Well, we can't know for sure. Right? We don't yet have the technology of being able to say, oh, here's a gene that should be on and it's off, right? Well, what we can do is look at ourselves and try and understand that as best we can, right? So if there are high levels of anxiety and a person knows that their mother, for example, also has had very high levels of anxiety and went through a very significant trauma, then we could start to have a presumed understanding of that. It doesn't mean that we can just say, oh, now that we think that, if there's a good gene that got turned off by the trauma and passed to the child in the off stage, we can't just turn it back on. Right. But what we can do is we can look at that and say, okay, what it seems to be doing is creating a lot of baseline anxiety in this person that seems more inherited, so to speak, because they're kind of like that all the time when things are going well, when things are not going well, and it sort of mirrors the parent, right? Then it might inform treatment choices, how therapy is approached, for example, sometimes medicine use to try and take the product of that gene and the change and just reverse it, or change it through use of medicine. So we can learn a lot about how to make things better by looking at the history, right? And what may have or likely has come down to a person. The other side of that coin, if we're thinking about genes that we may pass along, is to do the best we can for ourselves, which is also doing the best we can for children who aren't created yet. So if I have an aspect of inherited trauma that's creating something in me that's not as healthy as it can be, and I really go look at that and work on that, then I can make change within myself, which may change what happens then downstream. So taking care of ourselves is consistent with taking care of potential children in the future that a person may or may not have, and understanding ourselves always helps, whether we're going to look back at the people who came before us or forward at the people who come after us.
So there's a big responsibility, if I look at myself, with traumatic experience in the past, that I look at that and I acknowledge that there is something also for the future generations to not have to carry that burden on top, right? And if I do so, how do I do so?
The first part is we have to really take stock of ourselves, which often we don't do. Right? We don't develop a narrative of self. We go through life is that there's so much pressure that so many people are experiencing, and life moves so fast that often our conception of self is like, okay, how am I right now? And what do I have to do? Right? What do I have to get done during this day? We think of ourselves in the now, but if we step back and we look at the narrative of our life, then we're already, several steps down the road of understanding ourselves. And we can talk to people around us. So just an example might be saying, okay, if I realize like I'm not getting out and about in the world anymore. I'm not engaging with other people. I don't want to go out. I just want to stay at home, and I don't feel great. And I'm spending more time alone. I'm just down and my thoughts are negative and dark. To think, okay, how did that happen in me? Right? Was that always the way it was? Which almost surely the answer is no. So when did that start to happen? Did something really happen? Like, oh, that happened after the accident, for example, or is it not something we can identify, but it happens because a person has been, in a job they don't like and they feel incompetent, and that's happened for a long time, or in a relationship that may have some dismissive or even abusive component, like to look at ourselves, how am I now? What am I happy with? What am I not happy with? And what's the story of how I've gotten here? As I say, people don't come out of the womb feeling awful about themselves and having panic attacks and, thinking they're not worth being here or they'll never be okay. Something has happened along the way. So we can look inside ourselves and we can talk to people around us, right? Often people who know us or people who love us have thoughts about us, and we can ask them, or if we see in someone else, hey, I really see that person changed after, a loss, or I just see they change. They're really different. I don't know why. We can talk to ourselves and to each other about this. So it starts with shining light on us, right? And then there is a way of going through and assessing ourselves. And part of this, the first book that I wrote was, of course, about trauma. And the second book now, which is in progress, is about this step of how to take stock of our mental health and how to build better mental health. And it's that is really my sort of primary message now, because that is of help to all of us. So people who've experienced trauma and had brain change, okay, that will be of help. But for people who have not, who are living in a world of insecurity and often a world of stress and fear, it can be of help to all of us, because we all share this, how this brain, we have the same structure in our brain. We can understand it just like our bodies to say, yeah, I want to be healthy. And that's in part for now. Right? I want to be as healthy as I can be today because I want to do my job as well as I can. I want to be as healthy as I can be when I go home to family, right? So it is important about today, but what about the future? Right? I mean, so much of why we build physical health is we think about the future, right? We think about lifespan and health span. So we want to look at ourselves and project ourselves forward. What about doing that in here, right? Because good mental health also predisposes us to good cognitive health, right? So,
Yeah.
for example, pushes against Alzheimer's disease. It pushes against all sorts of things that can happen to us as we get older. So why would we not, in mind and body, say, I want to understand myself and I want to be able to make myself healthier for right now and also for the future?
Well, that leads me directly to talking of children and young adults, where the mental health crisis seems to be sort of skyrocketing. I believe the numbers in the United States, for example, are that the second leading cause of death for a 10-year-old, 10 to 14, I believe, is suicide. So that is an absolutely horrific number. What can we do better to protect the young generation?
Mhm. I think we have become so short-sighted that we expend gargantuan resources, right? Money, energy, time on things that don't make us any healthier and often make us less healthy. So one aspect of consumerism, of so much time and energy going into the next shiny thing in the world around us. So, whether it's a new television, it's a new game, whatever it may be. I'm not against like having nice things and having things that lead us to live happier lives, but we're so focused on consumerism and we're so focused on conflict. How much money, certainly in this country, do we spend with infighting, right? With one group of people attacking another while we ignore our infrastructure, Right? So if I go back to my home and I decide, I'm not going to put much time or energy or any money into into the house, right? And then next thing you know, now the lawn is overgrowing and things are unkempt and they're falling off of the house and maybe it's not even safe. Now something is crumbling and I fall stepping off the porch, right? Why would I look at that and be surprised? Right? If
Mm.
I decided, I've got about $10 or 10 euros I'm going to put into my house, that's it. Why would I be surprised if I see it falling down around me when I roll that tape forward, right? And I think it's that we have to look at, that so much of this is just 100% predictable because we are not putting resources into it. We do not value mental health. What does that mean? We don't value us. We don't value our children. But that's the truth of it, right? We don't value enough our health, our mental health, and the safety of our children to say that children in a young age demographic, and the second leading cause of death is suicide, is so tragic, could drop my jaw to the floor, right? I mean, it should do
Yeah.
that for all of us. Yet it doesn't make us change. We're seeing this in front of us. Like, come on, right? Look at this. Look at what is happening. And we are not making different choices.
So a lot of the experts are saying that, a big cause to these detrimental numbers is the use of digital media. Is that one of the big stressors and one of those things we definitely have to look at?
It's a huge stressor in people,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
And certainly a huge stressor in young people. It's like, anything else that's powerful, for example, can be used, it can make good or it can make bad, right? So think about the opiate crisis in the United States. It's abhorrent, the number of people who have died from opiate overdoses. So in the realm of, say, 50,000 people a year from opiates that are prescribed, let alone opiates that are illicit. But I would at times give talks about opiates, and I would start by saying, like, it's not that they're bad, right? It's if you break your leg, you have a surgery, thank goodness they're opiates, right? They have served such a purpose for humanity. But if we aren't respectful of their strength, right, aren't respectful of their power, then look at the destruction that they cause, right? Like, the problem is us, right? And the same thing is true with social media, right? I mean, so much good can come of it, right? Education, right? People being able to have affiliation in good, healthy ways. People who don't now feel isolated. There's so much good that can come of it, but we're wielding it in ways that are reckless. So we're not, monitoring or modulating. Like, what content are children accessing? Like, what about the speech that's coming in to them? What about the ways of affiliating that are unhealthy, right? The beckoning to join groups or think about oneself in ways that polarize from others, right? Or even the bullying that occurs, right? The messaging that occurs that says, like, you are not good enough, like, you are not okay. This is coming out to people, and certainly it's worse, as with anything that can be traumatic or potentially traumatic, the younger we get. And it's like we're wielding something of immense power, and we're wielding it without appropriate respect, without appropriate safeguards. And that's why it's doing more harm than good, not because it's intrinsically evil. Like, look at what we're trying to do here, right? We're using it, how many? We're 9 time zones apart, yet you and I can have this conversation in the service of spreading knowledge and helping people, right? I mean, there's a
Yeah.
real beauty to this. So it's not intrinsically bad, but unless we respect its power, it will do more harm than good, like anything powerful that we don't respect.
Yeah, I always say the same. I mean, you look at, I don't know, a chainsaw, for example. I don't think ever anyone has put a chainsaw on the market, or even when it came to the market first time, and said, great, this is for chopping trees, and period. So, of course, when a powerful tool comes along, you're also informed about the dangers, right?
Right.
And that's something we haven't done with the
Right.
content of the media. The phone in front of you, as such, is not the threat. You sitting at a, I don't know, Google spreadsheet or an Excel sheet is not going to be the major, most likely not the major stressor in your life. But all these other tools that have been also formed, which one has to say to keep you hooked, where has been our responsibility to look at the negative sides? Because every sharp tool comes with a dark side. Somehow we sort of missed out on the dark sides of social media and all the content. And I think it's really high time that we start talking about, the dangers and how we can protect ourselves and the children, obviously, for the younger generation, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. You said it's so easy to see that a chainsaw can be very dangerous, right? It can be used as a weapon. It can be used in a well-meaning way, but accidentally we can hurt ourselves, right? So there's so much precaution with it. And I think my thought about chainsaws and the people I've known who've seen using them is that they're respectful of them, right? Like, this isn't a powerful tool. Like, we can cut this tree down with it. Like, that is very, very powerful. We can also hurt ourselves with it. So, like, let's be safe with it. It is less obvious with social media, for example, because it's mental health. It's not physical health, but there's our ability to look away from that we cannot see, and to pretend if I don't see it, oh, it's not real. But like, how close are we then to the ostrich that puts its head in the ground, right?
Mental health struggles often go unnoticed, even with loved ones nearby, or closest ones. Why is it so difficult to recognize when someone you love is struggling?
Well, I think there's a big difference between something going unnoticed, which does sometimes happen, right? But I think what's more common is that it is noticed, but the other person doesn't know what to do with it, right? So they notice that person is different or changed. I mean, this happens so often where when I work with groups of people or support systems, the people who care about the person or love the person, right, they know something is different, but they don't know what to say about it, or they're worried. Oh, I thought if I broached that, gosh, you've really been different since that loss during the pandemic, they'd worry, will that make the person worse, right? Will I then be responsible for harming them because I broached it? Or if I broach it, what would we do about it, right? So a lot of times what our brains do is try and make sense of, rationalize, or even just filter out negative information we don't know what to do about. So part of how you and I can help is guiding people, even right now, to say, hey, putting well-meaning words to something is okay. Of just saying, hey, I noticed something that just seems a little different in you. Like, they're gentle ways of saying it to help let someone know, I notice there's change in you. Because people often feel so bad. Like, I feel so much worse and different, and no one around me is noticing. Right. And often it's not that no one is noticing, it's that we haven't, given words and ways that which someone can broach it with someone else. And we can help people around that. Gentle words put to something we notice in another they often open the door to tremendous change and help for that person. And maybe for us too.
On that note, mental health can manifest very differently, sometimes based on gender. What are some of the key differences is how men, women, and children exhibit emotional distress?
There's a difference between what we see across the population. So for example, men will tend to cross the population to try and hide things more, to feel a sense of shame at not feeling well, right? Whereas women are more likely to feel less shame or not feel ashamed of not feeling well, and then say seek help or seek communication. So there's just an example of a very broad brush fact that I think it's good for us to keep in mind, right? But then also to keep in mind that people are so different, right? So that doesn't mean every man, of course, or every woman is like that. And for us to look at who is the person in front of me, because we all cope differently. And even though there might be trends across the population, we just have to look at who's that person I'm thinking about now. How is that person built? How might that person be behaving? Because we can't rely on the trends to tell us about any one specific person.
You would say you can't generalize that, because I remember, someone close to me who was a man, and he was definitely struggling with depression, as it turned out, but it manifested itself in a lot of anger.
Right.
and aggression, and that's
Yes.
not so often what I have not seen in, for example, female friends who were diagnosed with a depression.
Yeah, I think that is typically more male to try and cover, so to speak, difficult feelings. Like I'm not feeling well, and I feel like there's something not right. Right? I'm depressed. I'm not enjoying anything. I don't want to get out of bed. For that to be sort of covered with an expression of anger, so to speak. Yes, that does happen. It's more common in men than women. Definitely. So if you're seeing anger in a man that's unexplained, that we don't know what to make sense of it, it makes sense to think, hey, maybe that's depression in the person. Now that can happen in women too. So if there were a woman who all of a sudden is angry when she wasn't before, I would think about that in the woman too.
Okay.
It's just more common in men. Giving a person permission to express what's inside of them is always, like the best we can do vis-a-vis another human being, right? So even though women, think on balance, are more likely to seek help than men, women very, very often hide what is going on. Human beings very often hide what is going on, no matter what that what other demographic that human is in, and particularly around role performance. So a woman being perhaps in a situation of feeling responsible for, say, care for a family, just one example, who feels like it's not okay that I don't feel okay because I have these responsibilities, right? I have to do this, right? So then the person is hiding that, and you could see that come out as anger or irritability. You could see those things, or you could see it come out in other ways of now the person doesn't want to engage in things that she used to enjoy. So here's where any behavioral change, any change in a person, right, is a reason for us to think, should I say something just calm and kind and well-meaning and inquire about that, no matter who that person is, because human beings most often hide or don't understand what's going on inside of us. So if we don't understand, we don't know how to make sense of it or how to communicate. And if we're hiding it, then we're not going to communicate about it, because that is so common for humans that there are trends across demographics. But really what we as humans need to do, I think, for other humans is look, and if we see something that's different in the person or an event that could happen that could change things, is to into that gentle way to just inquire, I care about you, and I just noticed something. That's the way that we open a door to sometimes, a whole sea change in that person's life. And again, sometimes in our own life, that we broach something with someone and then we become part of that conversation too, and we look at ourselves more. So this gentle inquiry, right? What I think of compassionate curiosity, so much of what I do and what I advocate for, it just anchors to that of compassionate curiosity, which I could feel about me if I see, gosh, something different happened, something difficult happened, and I see, gosh, I'm different. I'm more angry or more irritable, or I enjoy things less. Can I have compassionate curiosity for me about that? And if I can have that for me, I can have it for other people too, right? I can note, oh, you seem to be different, or that thing happened and I'm worried about the effect it might have had. Let me just, in a compassionate way and curious way, just ask you about it. Now, if we can do it for ourselves, we can do it for others. But a lot of times we learn how to do it for ourselves by doing it for others. That we think, I'm going to find in myself the bravery to look at something that tells me I'm worried there's something going on with you, and I'm going to ask you about it, right? And then that can give us sort of practice or embolden us to say, hey, there are things to look at in me too. Maybe I can show the compassionate curiosity towards me because I was able to call upon it for another person.
Sometimes, though, something is really off with someone well, whoever that might be, and you're inquiring, as you just mentioned, and you'll get massive pushback. So what do you do with someone who denies help and is still clearly suffering or struggling, at least?
We could potentially get into a very complicated situation. So if that thing that's going on is really unhealthy, it may require something that could seem sort of a more dramatic thing to do. Like if, for example, if that behavior or that change is putting that person's life or health at risk, it might warrant a call to emergency services even, right? Or it might warrant a boundary if someone is now behaving different and isn't safe or healthy to be around, of saying, I know that you're saying there's nothing going on in you, but I'm perceiving a difference and I need to take care of myself or the children or whatever it may be. So we may need to do things that are more dramatic because the situation warrants it. Oftentimes just kind of taking in that information and thinking about it can lead us to the next step. So if I really see that something has changed in that person and they don't want to see it, I might think, okay, who else could I talk to? Maybe that person, it's hard for them to hear it from me. We're not as close as that person is with some other people. Is there someone else in his or her life who could broach that? Could we broach it together? So could I put it in writing? Maybe reading it, it could be better than just hearing the words. So then we take the information and we think, okay, what is it that I'm going to do with this to try and help that person? Or in, again, more extreme situations, put some protective boundary around or really force the issue of that person getting help because I'm afraid for their health or safety.
So do you think, creating a better or more healthy future as humans, we should just also probably take the pendulum back a little bit? Because in the end, for a human being to thrive, because we're a social being, is that a sense of community, being together with loved ones, is going to take that that movement, or what do you want to call it, to remind humans that how they function the best. And that is with, being empathetic with others, being together with others, but it's often in community, right? And I guess that's such a big problem because we're, obviously we're as connected as we've never been before, but yet people are so very lonely.
Well, I think a big part of everything that you're talking about is like you said, roll the clock back a little bit or roll the time back. Maybe we should roll the time back in each of us to kindergarten. I think it's to behave more like kindergartners. I mean, it's not that long that I was in kindergarten class. And you see like the rules of conduct, like listen when someone else is talking, right? Keep your hands to yourself, right? Look for, is there something that you could do for someone, right? Is there something nice? Do you see someone who's sad? The rules are so good, right? And they're so basic and they're so wholesome. And I look and I think this is not the world around us, right?
Yeah.
And if these children in kindergarten behaved like people do in the world around us, they'd all fail kindergarten, right? That's the way you could fail kindergarten, just to behave like an adult. So it's really the first question you asked me of, a way to feel good or to have something in my day that can make the day better. And it's not something complicated, right? It's like our days are very, very stressful. What goes on in our minds are very, very stressful. We need to anchor back to simple things. So if I can feel grateful that, look, I'm here, right? I'm here, I'm functioning, right? There are people around me that I love who love me, and I can do good things in the world and receive good things back. Like let's just start with the simple goodness of that, and then trying to ground to the kindergarten values that we just treat each other better because there's a simple goodness that says, hey, if I can smile at you, right, instead of a frown or a difficult look, then like, isn't that better for me and for you? And the amazing thing is it does change us when we have a different approach to the world that comes through this lens of simple goodness. When we do this, it is good for other people, but the key pointer is it's good for us, right? It does serve others, but it serves the self as well, which is always the case. If we're doing good things for ourselves, that is good for others. If we're doing good things for others, it is good for us. And it's like real, and it helps change us away from high blood pressure, poor self-care, overweight, poor diet and exercise, frustration inside of us, and poor sleep and depression. I mean, it helps take us away from all of these things that the world around us is pushing us towards, and we can understand ourselves better, our own narratives and our own histories, and how our minds work, and build better mental health for right now and for the future.
Yeah. And I think it's very, very important to also acknowledge that seeking help, if you really need help, if you have
Yes.
very severe problems and issues, is not a weakness, it's a strength.
Yes. Absolutely, yes.
And that, help is out there, and it's important to seek help and be part of, and go out there to in order to heal. Yeah, and thanks to great personalities like you, Paul. There are fantastic
Thank you.
people out there who actually can help.
You and I, in our own ways, are trying to do our part, and I'm appreciative of the times that we've been able to do our parts together, and this is one of them. So, thank you
Yeah,
so much for having me on. It's great to see you as always.
as always, and looking forward to more work together in that field.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, have a
Yes,
wonderful rest of the day. I mean, your day is just starting, I think.
yes.
Ours is ending, but yeah, speak soon, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much again.
Thank you very much. You take care.
Wow, there is so much to take in from that conversation with Dr. Paul Conti. Honestly, I feel like I need to go back and listen again just to absorb everything he shared. One thing that really stuck with me was his advice to anchor ourselves in simplicity, those basic values we're taught as children: kindness, honesty, and gratitude. Sometimes going back to those simple truths is exactly what we need in life when it feels overwhelming. I'm going to start by finding one moment of gratitude every day. And right now, that moment is for Dr. Paul Conti, for his time, his wisdom, and his deep commitment to helping others. I hope you found this episode as meaningful and thought provoking as I did. You'll find more about Dr. Conti's work, including his book, Trauma, the Invisible Epidemic, linked in the show notes. And if you'd like more expert insight and honest conversations like this one, don't forget to click the follow button and join us again on How Do We Manage. This episode was brought to you by Audi, hosted by me, Stephanie von Bismarck, and featured Dr. Paul Conti. It was produced by Tori Pope, the production manager was Angela Crago, and executive producer was Ellie DiMartino. The series was recorded and edited at Potshop Studios in London. Thanks for listening, and take care.